Hello. Hi, I'm Jakob Sanderson, your temporary host. That's my fun fact today, by the way, is that I'm hosting the show because Thomas Tipple, as you will hear in limited spurts, has come down with quite a nasty sore throat. So you're getting octave down Tipple today. He's going to be sitting in the analyst chair, so he doesn't have to put quite as much pressure on the vocal cords. Lucas is out this week after a heroic performance, guiding us through all the post-draft after shows and through Saturday. And our fourth co-host for much of that is Ryan Heath. Ryan Heath steps into the chair today. I'm Jacob. Thomas, what's your fun fact today, other than that you're sick?
So my fun fact today is that after almost 20 hours of streaming this week, I still somehow found a way to have the worst Xavier Worthy take in the Dynasty community. So it's my fun fact today. In Ryan, I'm not sure if we told you, but you have to have a fun fact.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I realized this 5 minutes before the show. So my fun fact was actually going to be, I feel like I'm coming down with a cold, but then I got into the room and saw Thomas. I was like, I can't steal that thunder from him. I'm just going to sound like I'm whining. So my fun fact is I recently discovered like sparkling water, seltzer water. I don't know why anyone drinks normal water. It's just better.
When's the first time someone asked you want sparkling or still? You trying to act like you drank sparkling water before you came out here? All right. Tom's never going to let me host again. Okay, today what we're going to do, we are going to debate some of the major questions that I think are going to define your rookie drafts. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're ordering quarterbacks 2 through 4. It feels like everyone you ask has a different take, and they even have a different reason for that take. We're going to talk about just how much to downgrade Brock Bowers. If you caught any of our draft streams, these are things we've discussed a little bit already. We're going to dig into who the heck is the wide receiver 4 and really whether there's anyone worth actually drafting at the 109 or whether we're all trying to trade back. And we're going to talk a little bit about draft capital. We're going to talk about what do you do when a quarterback you don't like goes in the first, and correspondingly, what do you do when a wide receiver you do like goes in the fourth? Who do you draft first? And once we get through those, we're going to deal with some of the questions that people sent in. All of that and more coming up right away on Dynasty Points. All right. Welcome back. This is quite weird to be in the host chair of this show. I don't think I've ever hosted any show in the fantasy community, but we've already been debating it a lot prior to this show in our coverage of the draft, especially the post day 2 show. We had Brett on. The quarterbacks, who do we draft 2, 3, and 4 have received a lot of attention. I've been in a battle in our Discord for the last hour as people are discussing this from all angles. And my honest take is I think it is reasonably defensible to draft them in really any order you want. But how did you guys come to the conclusion of how you're drafting Daniels, May, and McCarthy, and why? I'll come to the end, but let's start with Thomas because I know we had a little bit of a debate on this over the weekend.
Yeah, I think coming into this, I had it decided that I would be lower on whoever New England took because I'm starting to understand that quarterbacks are a product of their environment as much as they are in need of talent, right? If the environment is so woefully insurmountable that it limits them just for years, you're just sitting on a value play. I already liked McCarthy a little better as part of the Fantasy Points cultus. So obviously having him get to the better spot, attempted trade or not, he's still where he is. And I think that I've said it forever. I think the only person I can value or really scout quarterbacks is God, because the rest of us were just guessing and picking our favorites. So Daniels for me it's a long-term issue. Like I said, there was a comment on one of our live shows where it said that Daniels looks like someone's going to kill his family if he doesn't jump into a linebacker or a pass rusher, like head first every rush. I think that could be a serious problem. I don't care as much about the age, but it's a longevity thing for him. And if anybody thinks that I am a running quarterbacks get hurt savant, you don't know what team I've been following, who I've been defending. since 2018. So no, it's just how it is for me. So maybe May ends up having this like freakish athletic profile that helps him overcome some stuff. I'm confident enough in McCarthy to be consistent and have upside in the KOC system with one of the top 2 receivers in the game. So that's kind of how I sorted it out. And then after that, it's just kind of by favorites. I have Daniels ahead of May because Daniels rushing could kind of take over and help him produce. I think May is really just kind of stuck. So that's kind of going to be my point for a little while now.
So just to be clear, you're saying, just for anyone listening, in case maybe that wasn't super clear, you're JJ, then Daniels, then May, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ryan, what's your take on these guys?
Yeah, so I am Daniels, then May, then JJ. Having Daniels first is just that I would say that's the take I would like super stand on more so than the other two, just because the upside of Daniels rushing is so unbelievable in fantasy. I understand we can say, oh, maybe it's a bit concerning. Maybe he's not a long-term starter in the league. I know he bails from clean pockets a lot. A lot of the pressure to sack rate stuff looks really bad for him. Like he's in like very much like colossal like bust potential territory just off of that stat alone. I understand all of that, but then I look at the Justin Fields career arc where you could get 2 years of QB1 production out of Fields and then trade him away at a profit. Even Trey Lance never saw the field, but just the thought of that rushing upside would allow you to trade him away for basically the same amount a year later. So for Daniels, I just don't think anyone's going to care like, oh, is he a long-term player in this league once he puts up a handful of top 6 weekly finishes, which is very much like what I expect. At least at some point in his rookie season. I believe, holds the record for the most single season scramble yards in NCAA history. Had over Lamar Jackson, I believe, was the only one who was close. So it's just hard for me to get off of him solidly at QB2. And then just going down to May and McCarthy, I do think it matters that the Minnesota Vikings pretty clearly preferred May to McCarthy. There was more reporting out today that the Vikings did try to trade up with the Patriots for both of their firsts this year and for their 2025 first, and they were shot down. So I'm just gonna lean a little bit into the NFL evaluators there in terms of am I gonna prefer May or McCarthy in my dynasty leagues? I'm not going to super jump down anyone's throat that has them reversed. I understand McCarthy maybe projects a little better as a rookie, but I don't think it's a big enough gap to where that's going to overcome the talent evaluation for me.
Before you get going there, Jacob, I just want to point out in terms of like a quarterback that you can like trade in a couple years no matter what. I understand why that doesn't work for everybody. Not everyone is the type of manager that can do that. That can knowing when to get out when peripherals are at its best, and you can kind of see the other side coming, is the greatest tool a dynasty player has in the tool belt. Not everyone has it, and also if you play in a mass amount of leagues, right, you might want to hold on to that player a little more. Or if you play in fewer leagues and you're more concentrated, you may just want to avoid that possibility altogether and play a little bit for safety. Ryan, you and I were talking that it turns out that I rank for safety more than I rank for pure upside. And I don't know if some of that is just maybe I'm in so many leagues, I don't have it in me to make all those moves when I need to, and then I get stuck. So I just want to let people know there is a difference depending on your play style on how these guys can end up being ranked. Sorry.
Totally. Tom is leaving it all out on the court tonight. You have to have nothing but respect.
No Austin Matthews
for
here.
this
We
man.
play through it.
Absolutely playing through it. Okay, I think if people have read or watched me talk about these three quarterbacks, I would assume that they're going to expect one of two things. And one is for me to extol all the virtues of Drake May, which I actually plan to do a little bit. Or two is to go on a big diatribe about how it doesn't actually matter because you just have to draft everybody at cost and it's all about trading back. And I'm not going to do that stuff. I'll say this. If you want like an actual take from Jakob on like how would I specifically navigate getting the exposures that I want at which prices, there's an article for that. It's boring. It has a lot of words. I think it's a good read. It's on my Substack. If we're just talking about which of the quarterbacks we prefer today, I honestly think, and I want to kind of outline what the choice is because I think it's fascinating. There are all these different elements, right? Tom said it best. He's like, the only person I trust to evaluate quarterbacks is God. There are all these like known unknowns in terms of what matters and what doesn't matter at quarterback. And it's probably not 100-0 in any case. It's probably this big mix of things. And almost every quarterback of these three has something else in their favor, right? If you're a person who thinks, you know what, I think the market underrates how much environment has to do with how successful these quarterbacks are, that's going to push you towards McCarthy, if that's your viewpoint. If you're someone who says, you know what, I'm just going to trust the NFL, right? I'm going to go with whoever has the highest draft capital because they know better than me. Well, that's going to push you towards Daniels and May, the opposite of McCarthy. If you're someone who says, I don't know what the hell is going to happen, so I'll just take the guys who run. We have Daniels as the extreme of that. May is, I think, still I think one thing that constantly gets underrated about Drake May is how much he runs. He had 698 rushing yards. That's more. This is a bad faith statistical pull, but for the record, it's more than Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, and Josh Allen ever had in a college season. So I think his rushing upside is substantially devalued in the fantasy space when people compare him to Jaden Daniels. Or, they look at, okay, who do I just think is good, right? Just trying to evaluate the talent. I don't even think that that's clear, right? Because it depends on what you evaluate. Jaden Daniels had the best season of these guys. That's indisputable. It also happened when he was much older than these guys. So how much do you care about peak season versus age? How much do you care about their environment in college, right? If we're going to say these guys are a consequence of their environment in the NFL, do we care that, Drake May is throwing to a day 3 receiver and nobody else, and Jaden Daniels is throwing to 2 first-round receivers? Do we care that, do we care about the fact that JJ McCarthy never threw? There's all these different things, which is why I ultimately think the answer is to kind of figure it out with cost. But if I could come to one take on this, it's that I think my personal opinion, how I weigh up these factors, I'm in the camp of environment matters a lot, at the very least for floor. I totally agree with Tom on that. I think JJ McCarthy is going to succeed. I do, right? I think it would be ideologically inconsistent for me to say, I don't really think Purdy's all that good. I don't really think Tua is all that good, but they're going to achieve a baseline level of success in these offenses and not apply the same thing to JJ McCarthy. The question is, those guys have a place in our dynasty landscape, which is usually around the 2-3 turn, give or take. That tends to be where they top out. I don't think that's necessarily McCarthy's ceiling. I think he could achieve more than that. But I would say his chance of being more than that, probably similar to his chance of straight busting. So if we just assume that he's going to live in that zone, it comes down to, well, what do we think of these other guys? And for me, I look at May, and he just checks my boxes in terms of a guy who was able to put up efficient offense in an adverse environment in college, who has the rushing profile upside, who's aggressive and is a playmaker, and who's able to have the elite arm strength that not just matters from fantasy perspective, but from, in my view, a real life perspective of who can be a true ceiling changing quarterback for a franchise. I just see in the number of scenarios where May hits, the environment's not going to kill him. And he's going to be that top half first round startup pick guy, which is why I lean towards him. And I would say the same for Daniels, of course. And in the scenarios where the environment is the reason why they die, to me, that's the difference between, well, if May was on the Vikings, he could have been a round 3 startup pick, but he's on the Patriots, so he washes out. But if you're actually that good, if you're above this level, if you're a Herbert, if you're a Burrow, if you're a Josh Allen, then I think you can transcend. That's what I believe. And so for me, May's a guy I have conviction in his ability to do that. Daniels, I think if he's that guy, that's where the upside is. I'm just so much less confident that he's that guy. So I end up with May, and then I end up with Daniels, and then I end up with McCarthy. My one big point of contention with kind of the market is, I guess with Ryan, really, is I've seen a lot of people say like, hey, how confident are you in Drake May? You shouldn't be so confident in Drake May. You should have McCarthy above him because of the environment. I disagree, but I think that's reasonable. I respect what Tom is doing, saying, you know what? I'm going to take McCarthy over both of these guys. I don't really get how we've decided that like May is in the conversation with McCarthy, but Daniels is immune to that conversation as like a community, as an ADP. I just don't think the upside is that different between May and Daniels. And I don't think the landing spot is that different. Like, is one 28-year-old Terry McLaurin going to be the reason why one fails and one succeeds? Like, I just think both of their landing spots are kind of crummy. So that's my contribution to the discourse. And Ryan, like, why do you see it as so different in terms of the upside case between them?
Sure. So first, before I answer that, I do want to build off another point you had just about environment in general. And it is true that quarterbacks, more than any other position that we draft in fantasy, create their own environment to some extent. So CJ Stroud, you see come in, wasn't really thought of as a great landing spot last year, has an incredible rookie season. Suddenly, Stephon Diggs, the at least top 5 diva wide receiver, is willing to go to Houston and play with him, assumedly, or they wouldn't have traded for him, right? So I definitely get that. To some extent, yeah, we are looking at the environment at one point in time, but that can very easily become completely irrelevant information based on how they perform and who they are as a talent. So totally would concede that, or would want to emphasize that. And then I completely forgot your question. Is it why I have May like separate from Daniels and say that that's a conversation, right? So I mean, I wouldn't say that they're super separate. So I do have them ranked Daniels, May, McCarthy. They are all in the same tier for me. So I mean, I'd love to be drafting 106 and taking whoever's there. That's totally fine with me. As for why I have that more confident lean toward Daniels, really, I just think that the rushing in terms of degrees is much. I would say Daniels has the potential to be like a top 3 rushing quarterback in the league. May is more like top 8. And that's a meaningful difference to me. I understand if it's not to you, or if you think that maybe that's a little bit overconfident of an evaluation just based off of what they did in college. But that would be the reason.
Daniels could be Lamar Jackson, but Drake May could be Josh Allen as rushers. I'm not like, if we're, I'm saying like, I think, like, I think Daniel's going to run for a whole lot more yards than May. I think May is going to run for more touchdowns. And I think that could even out. That would be my only feeling. It's like, is Lamar Jackson a more skilled rushing quarterback than Josh Allen? Oh, like, clear. But like, I don't think he actually produces that many more fantasy points on the ground when Josh Allen's just killing him with touchdowns because of the size factor with Lamar. And that's my only pushback on, like, if you're asking me who's going to have more rushing fantasy points, I would still take Daniels. I just think that the difference is a little bit overstated. But let's talk about.
Well, I will say, like, before, I know we've spent like almost 15 minutes on this, but I think it's important to note, and I've said it a couple of times, but I think it fits here, that these rushing quarterbacks from college translate their rushing games differently for pretty much each and every one of them. Lamar is a different rusher than Hurts. Hurts is a different rusher than Allen. Allen is a different rusher than so on. And so Kyler is different than Fields, and Fields does it differently than. So I'm interested to see how these rushing games go, because McCarthy can do the read option offense. He is athletic enough to do it. He feels more like a Russell Wilson type scrambler, where you say May is more maybe like a Josh Allen. I think he could end up more like a Patrick Mahomes, who gets a lot of first downs, a 300-400 yard season type thing with 6 to 8 touchdowns. I think is super reasonable. And I think you're right. Daniels could be, 800 to 1,000 yards as a rusher as well. I'm just curious to see how all of these scrambling quarterbacks translate their rushing game, because I find that you can't just copy and paste the same way. Like Richardson, we only saw a handful of games, but his rushing style was already different from what we saw in Indy than what we saw at Florida. So I think it's important to note that what we might hope for, right, may not be exactly what we get. Another reason why I'm kind of just a little bit more into McCarthy.
Yeah, it makes sense for sure. The next big guy, and it's another one that I know I disagree on with Tom, or at least have certainly in the past. And the Brock Bowers landing spot is going to get a lot of buzz. And we've seen wide-ranging opinions across the industry, and I'm going to disagree with this take, but I don't bring it up to throw it under the bus. I bring it up to paint indication of like the disparate views across the industry. JJ Zacharyson, who I consider to be, frankly, the best dynasty analyst in the space, Brock Bowers ranked 11 in Superflex, right? Another former guest of the show, guy I do dynasty podcasting with frequently, as Brock Bowers at 6, and that's Pat Kareem, right? I would say a lot of people that are doing dynasty rookie drafts, probably 2 of the most subscribed to sources for dynasty rookie data. That's a pretty big spread difference. It's, the top of one tier versus another tier down in the bottom of it. We've talked about it. I have him at 6. I think we have different spreads in terms of where Ryan has them, where Tom has them. We're a little bit all over the map. And again, it comes down to multiple things. It's how much do you care about the landing spot? It's how much do you care about the tight end position, I guess. And so where Brock Bowers fits in this, because I've seen him go as far down the list as 1.9 in my drafts already, and I've seen him go as high as 1.4. How are you guys handling Brock Bowers, in particular, post this Las Vegas Raiders bummer? Or does anyone want to make the case for why the Raiders are actually a dream landing spot?
I can do a little bit of both. I have him right behind Adunze right now at 8, but I am like flipping back and forth, like tight end premium at 7, not it's 8. I think I like part of what JJ said. I think it's a little extreme, but I like part of what he said in that Sam Laporta just had one of the greatest rookie tight end seasons you could ask for. I have been screaming about this for a month, probably 2, and that yet he's still being devalued. So what does Brock Bowers actually have to do to hit that Kyle Pitts level insanity? Because Kyle Pitts might have ruined it for everybody. I don't know. So I think that's definitely a part of it. I do think the landing spot does suck, but they run the ball so much. Play action might actually be good for him if I'm going to make a case. Gardner Minshew can definitely distribute the ball with crossers right in the middle of the field. Gardner Minshew is good enough to support fantasy viable assets. So I think if we get AOC, we're going to be crying and having that bit where it's like 2025 and we're praying for Brock Bowers upside to hit. But I actually don't terribly mind Minshew giving Bowers like 115 targets if we can hope for that. I think it salvages it, but I think kind of no matter what, the community is setting itself up to be disappointed with him. And I actually kind of think Leafs just won, didn't they? Yeah, it's Jacob's muted, but the Leafs definitely just scored in overtime. I haven't looked, so go Leafs, go.
Yeah, Matthew Nyes wins it for the Buds.
That's
what a
what's
legend.
Up. To finish my point, I only have so much win, Jacob. God, to finish my point, I think no matter what, the fantasy community is set up to be disappointed in Brock Bowers, but I'll say he's appropriately priced now in his startup prices as the tight end 3 or 4, depending on how you want to look at it. I think
I don't
he's
think Ryan
appropriately
has him as
priced.
tight end 4. So it's perfect. We got Tom as the middleman. We got
Oh yeah,
Ryan as the
Ryan's way low.
middleman,
I forgot.
and I'm coming in as the high guy. So let's get Ryan in here.
Sure. So I mean, just to say first, I also have like the utmost respect for JJ Zacharyson as a dynasty analyst. Also think he's the best in the space. I was very excited when I saw his Bowers ranking because I was like, yes, thank God I'm not going to be like the lowest person on Brock Bowers. Like I might actually get some in some of my rookie drafts now. So was very excited to see that. As far as kind of my take on the landing spot, I like Tom says, oh, like maybe we can hope for 115 targets. I won't lie, I haven't sat down and projected out this Raiders pass catching core yet. That sounds really optimistic to me for a rookie season target number for Brock Bowers. I think at least to some extent, he will be splitting routes with Mayer at the very least early in the season, if not throughout. Jacob had an amazing rant about Getsy and the just illogical decisions that he is sure to make in this spot. So I recognize the talent of Bowers, and that does matter. So I have Bowers clearly in my top 8. I have him ranked 8th among rookies. I do think you should try to get some of him if you're there. I'm not on my take from 3 days ago of like I'm just always trading the 108. I think it's fine to take Bowers. I do think you almost
have
maybe
him in a tier below McCarthy and Adunze, right?
Correct. Yes, I have him in a tier below McCarthy and Odunze. So my tiers go 1-1 to 1-2, 1-3 to 1-7, and then I have Bowers at 1-8. So I guess kind of my thinking here is just my point got completely lost by Jacob asking my tiers. I was enjoy that, Thomas. You're loving that right now. I can see you. I don't know. Someone come rescue me and say something about Brock Bowers.
Okay, my take for Bowers. First of all, one thing, and this applies to Dunze, a lot of the discussion around him and is he JSN and all that stuff. I don't think that we give the market enough credit for understanding context. I think that we do this thing as a fantasy community pretty often where we're like, this guy's situation is bad for X reason. I don't know. Maybe it's quarterback, maybe it's coordinator, maybe it's target competition, and been a reasons. And then we're like, and because of that, his value is going to go down. And like, I just think if something is bad or good, we do the same thing, the opposite with other, in the other way. Sometimes we'll be like, once this happens, this guy's value is going to go up, or like, he's in this great situation, so his value is going to go up. I don't think that we're that stupid as a community. I think that I think that if something is that obvious that everyone agrees on, right? I think it's one thing if you have a take, like if someone comes in and they're like, actually, I think the Vikings landing spot's overrated, right? That's not getting baked in. But to me, like if you're coming in saying like JJ McCarthy is going to go up later because the Vikings are good, or you're saying like Brock Bowers is going to go down later because the Raiders are bad. It's like, I think we all know that the Raiders are bad and the Vikings are good. So I think that's why they're valued where they are in the first place. Like you bring up Kyle Pitts, and like Kyle Pitts has done a pretty impressive job of holding value in the space while in a shitty environment, right? And I understand he's dropped from where he was valued, but especially if you look at where he's been compared to where Bowers is valued now, like he's never really plummeted as far as you'd think based purely on his production, in which he's basically been unplayable in the last 2 years. And he's still managed to maintain himself in the top 5 tight ends. And now that he's got Kirk Cousins, it's like his value is up like it's never left. He's like solidly back in the top 5 tight ends. So I think, it's like the JSN discussion too, where it's like, yeah, I think that him being stuck in a target squeeze was like clearly baked in. Him being super inefficient was not baked in. So that's why I think his value went down. We don't even know how good JSN is yet. We have no idea. It's very possible that if DK Metcalf went down for the season in week 3, either JSN would have been awesome, he would have been unlocked, and now he'd be wide receiver 9. It's also possible that he would have been the exact same disappointment. And now we don't have an excuse because there was no DK Metcalf blocking him, and he's currently Dynasty wide receiver 58. Like we just don't know. So with Bowers, I think that there's some level of value benefit to being stuck in a situation that people already have a preordained excuse about. I think ultimately it just comes down to, for his value, to how does he look on the field? If he is looking good on the field and his targets per route run is high and his yards per route run is reasonably high, and everybody thinks that he just got screwed by Luke Getsky and Gardner Minshew, like I don't think his value is going to go down. I think the community has shown, like, look at Garrett Wilson, right? Garrett Wilson hasn't done shit, frankly, production-wise, in terms of box score-wise. But everybody has eyes, and they look at the fancy stats, and they're like, yeah, I watched the games. This guy looks pretty fucking sick to me. And he's managed to maintain his value, right? I think that that's where we're at with Bowers. So I think he has interim value insulation and then long-term production in the sense of, like, we just talked about the Sam Laporta thing. We're not going to redo the whole Sam Laporta thing. But, like, which tight end is going to get me 20 points per game? I don't know a single tight end, right? Yeah, like it's peak Travis. Like that's the mark. So if people are saying, like, what more could Sam Laporta have done? It's like, that's what more Sam Laporta could have done. Is it a high bar? Yeah. But if I'm asking who's going to clear it, for me, it's Bowers. Like, that's the guy who has the best production profile of all time, who's been able to command targets consistently down the field, who led the entire country in yak for 3 consecutive years. Like, to me, he's such an outsized level of ceiling, and maybe it doesn't translate, but where, like, I just see him as this future cheat code possibility that is like a little bit more immune to this. Yeah, there's lots of good young tight ends now. Like, I'm willing to set the bar high enough for him where, yeah, if Brock Bowers becomes Dalton Kincaid, I legitimately do consider that a failure. Like, I don't mean that his, like, career is a failure. He's a failure of a human.
Fucking
but, like,
terrible.
The Brock Bowers thesis is he's something that we've never seen before or have only seen before once with Pete Travis Kelce. And, we'll see. I have concerns about route share and all that stuff. But, like, to me, these are, like, concerns about redraft leagues. Like,
yeah,
if Brock Bowers shows up and he's a god among men, then, well, first of all, like, Michael Mayer's probably going to have to take a seat. Somewhere along the line.
And
also, right? Like, and also it's just like the people can get it. So we'll see. I think you're taking a shot on an exemplary talent. And so to me, the reason to not be in on Bowers at his current price, especially with it already dropping, having gotten this Raiders landing spot, is tight ends voodoo, and I don't feel confident scouting it. And that's a fair take. I don't think it's the Raiders. He's doomed for life.
I will just add, I'm rediscovering what my point was from before. So I will add, if you're in, like, a startup right now, or if somehow you're in position to select him in a rookie draft, and your team, your plan for this year, your team is not competing, I think that's a great pick, because for all the reasons Jacob said, is like the built-in excuse, the value insulation, but also, he's not going to put a lot of potential points on your bench. That's going to help your draft position. He's, like, great for a productive struggle, right? So I see a lot of reasons and a lot of scenarios where Bowers is a very attractive pick. I don't want to sound like I'm completely one-sided here and that I want 0% exposure. But yeah, that would be my sort of angle.
I'll say that he is set up to have David Njoku, like, begging and pleading, like, please, can we use his athleticism? Please, when do we get to see it? Right? There is that risk with him right now, like there is with every tight end, that we are begging and hope, because I've said it. You need to have a tight end that's good enough. You need to have a tight end that is in the right system, with the right environment around them. This team's pace of play, and I am working on a new coach index that's really going to help sift through some of this stuff. Their pace of play might just be dreadful for the next 2 years. I think that there's as equal a chance that you will be able to acquire Brock Bowers for cheaper than what you have to acquire him right now, halfway through next year or the start of next year. And if I'm playing those odds, that's the odds I'm probably more often than not going to play, especially as a portfolio player. Hopefully that makes sense.
Totally. Let's talk about one more thing here before we get into questions. We're going a little late. We'll talk about at least one more. Maybe touch on one really fast. What are we doing at the wide receiver position? I don't know if we all have, I think that we are a weird. I'm gonna voice the silent opposition, because the typical fantasy wide receiver 4 in most of your rookie drafts is going to be Xavier Worthy. And the especially interesting thing about Worthy is that he is the one guy who is occasionally exempt from the jumble, right? There are some people out there who have Worthy in their top 8. There are some people who have Worthy kind of in his own floating tier where he's not behind the 8, but he's clearly the best of the 9th. I'll put it this way. If anyone is trading up to the 109 in your rookie drafts and the top 8 went how they normally go, I'm willing to bet that player is a Xavier Worthy, right? Not everybody has him ranked 1-9, but the people who have him ranked 1-9 tend to be the most passionate. People aren't trading up and mortgaging their future for Brian Thomas at the 109 for the most part. So none of us have Xavier Worthy wide receiver 4. Tom has him wide receiver 76 in the class. So why don't you go first? And how come the consensus is wrong about Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, set me up for failure there. Don't worry, I'll set myself up for failure. You don't need to help me here. No, so a lot of this is kind of vibe based. I will not lie. I think he's my wide receiver 5 or 6 now. If I were to go and pull it up, you'd think I would have it pulled up, but I am not so much in my element this evening. He is my wide receiver 6. I do have Brian Thomas Jr. ahead of him. No real reason right now why. It is kind of a coin flip for me, and I'll say this piggybacks a little bit off of what Scott says, even though he has him the highest out of anyone that I know right now. The Chiefs just kind of suck at drafting skill position players. Like, they just have kind of sucked. They've gotten lucky a little bit with Pacheco in the 7th round. They scored with Kelsey. They scored with Tyreek. And none of those guys were like elite prospects. Almost every single other player they have brought in at the skill positions has been dreadful. Sky Moore, they traded for Tony, Hardman, MVS, like the list goes on and on and on. So it would be disingenuous for me to say that isn't in the back of my mind. I do think Rice is really good. I don't know if Rice is playing for the mean machine or not to start the year. But when he comes back, it can be a jumbled mess. That there is Marquise Brown, who is a legit target earner, and Patrick Mahomes' offense outside of Tyreek Hill has just kind of been annoying, like in the post Tyreek Hill era. So there's just a lot of stink that comes with Worthy for me. And when it comes to that, like, I would hear arguments as to why Brian Thomas Jr. shouldn't be ahead of him. Okay, I'll hear that, but I prefer the 2 running backs, right? I prefer Benson and Brooks. I prefer Nix. I prefer Ladd McConkey, and then the usual suspects before that. I have a very hard time getting Worthy any higher. I know I'm going to get cooked for it. I understand he has a pretty good early analytical profile. I know who his quarterback is. #Chiefs. I get it. There's just so many other players that I like ahead of him for different reasons that I'm probably just going to let somebody else fall on the sword for me. And if I'm wrong, I will cry myself to sleep. But I'm okay being wrong here. And I'm okay having him as my wide receiver 6 and he is my rookie player 14 overall. So you can roast me at elnostrathomas everywhere. I'll be waiting.
All right. Yeah, before I start the roast, I will find one point of agreement there with the coughing guy, which is in terms of the Chiefs being bad at scouting skill players. There might be something to the idea that just in terms of what they prioritize as an organization is guys that Andy Reid thinks he can scheme touches and gets really excited about that. So that brings like the Mecole Hardman sort of archetype to mind.
Darwin Thompson.
Yeah, I can definitely I vibrate with that thought a little bit. Like I see where that's coming from. But look, I would say with Worthy, the surface level analytical profile is excellent. He was very productive very early on. I don't care about stats like Dominator, but I'm sure he looks great in Dominator rating, right? So,
yeah.
and that's fine. A lot of that production was kind of on like on screens, just Mickey Mouse routes type of stuff. But on the other hand, Andy Reid is the master of getting production off of Mickey Mouse routes. That was a lot of Rashee Rice's production as a rookie. Now, to be fair, Rice was also excellent when they were splitting him out wide. If you filter for throws 10 plus yards down the field, Rice was still awesome in yards per out run compared to most of his peers, still top 15, I believe. So I do think Rice can do quote unquote real wide receiver stuff. And the Worthy pick honestly makes me more confident that the Chiefs agree with that, because my guess on how this is going to shake out is that Rice gets kicked outside a little bit more, is kind of used as a more traditional receiver, while maybe Worthy is at least in their heads right now, maybe Worthy is more of like the close to the line of scrimmage weapon, getting the scheme touches. And that's fine. And that can work in fantasy. We just saw it mostly work last year for Rice. So I get why people have him high. I get the allure. For me, the reason that he's my rookie wide receiver 5 and why I have Brooks and Nix and McConkey over him is running back and quarterback are, first of all, more premium positions. So for running back, at least if it's a running back that can be a Scott Barrett-esque bell cow who can play on all 3 downs, catch passes, we have like 4 of those guys in the league right now. And if there's even a 20% chance of Jonathan Brooks doing that, then I'm taking him over Worthy, absolutely no questions asked. Same with Nix. We got into it a lot during our draft coverage, but I just view quarterback as the most premium position. I'm always going to prioritize a quarterback with top 12 draft capital over a wide receiver drafted towards the end of the first, pretty much no matter what, unless I'm incredibly, incredibly confident in the profile, which for Worthy, I'm not. There's just enough holes here in terms of I should say enough questions in terms of can he run like normal wide receiver types of routes at the NFL level against NFL level corners, that I am just happy to take Nix and Brooks ahead of him and be content in the fact that I may not get very much, because yeah, if you're ranking Worthy below the 109, there's a good chance you're gonna not get any of him if you're not willing to take him at the 109 or higher.
So I'll give, I had Worthy, full disclosure, I had Worthy as my wide receiver 6 pre-draft, which is why, and I've now moved him up actually to the wide receiver 5. But unfortunately, there's no Worthy wide receiver 4 truther on the show. So I'm going to do the best I can to try and give that perspective some light, right? Maybe I'm not going to do the world's best cosplay. But the one thing, to note is if you're a Worthy bull that I think is valid and that keeps me up at night when I think about how does my take blow up in my face, is we're coming off of what we do so often in the fantasy community is like one thing hits or misses, and then we relearn all these different lessons, right, about whatever just happened. And we're coming off of a year in which, I think we're kind of past the point now of being like binary and saying like this is a film guy or this is an analytics guy. Like there's so many different types of ways that we can evaluate players through film or through numbers. But definitely what last year was a bad year for was like sort by breakout age, sort by college receiving share, press end, right? We saw some of the profiles that hit, were either like just legitimately bad analytical profiles, like a Richie Rice, or profiles like a Puka Nacua or a Jaden Reed that really required some like under the hood number massaging, right? And on the contrary, like probably the highest profile flop is Quentin Johnston, who's really the opposite of this, where it's like the more you zoom out, the better the profile looks, because we have the first year breakout. We hit a lot of the key thresholds. And the more you zoom in, the more you're like, I don't know if I love the fact that we plateaued, right? We never actually hit that high of a peak in the numbers. We're just kind of hitting the bare minimum thresholds. We're really reliant on contested catch opportunities, but we're actually not converting a lot of those contested catch opportunities, like some of those more secondary descriptive concerns. And, I don't think there's two players that could possibly look less alike than Worthy and Quentin Johnston, but I have some of the same concerns about Worthy entering this draft that I had about Johnston last year, which was I like what I see when I look at the chart. I don't feel very comfortable translating it. The biggest red flag for me with Worthy is two of them. First of all, outside of his freshman year, not an efficient player. His profile is largely based on just raw volume earning, like dragging him over the top. But his yards per target in his sophomore and junior year are really quite poor, and his yards per route run is just average. Like his peak yards per run, 2.68 as a freshman, especially as a freshman, that's incredible. Falls off a cliff after that, largely due to post-target efficiency. And then you look at, okay, how is he compiling this target share, which is really what his profile is largely based off of. And, in his junior year, right, this most recent year, as only 24 of his 79 total targets coming in the intermediate areas, 10 to 19 yards. The highest proportion of his targets are sub 10 yards, and then basically about equal to his intermediate targets is 20 plus. This is kind of the Zay Flowers usage profile, where it's like the ADOT is kind of normal, but you're not actually getting any middle of the field targets. You're just getting a bunch of screens and a bunch of deep shots. And so when you just look at ADOT, it's like, normal ADOT, but like you actually watch the games and it's kind of gadgety. The difference was, you look at stuff like reception perception, like Zay Flowers scored far better as a downfield separator. And then Worthy, the 1 year, and Brian mentioned this in the chat, the year that Worthy really played a deep role was his year 2. And that was by far his most inefficient season. So we're drafting this guy, and it's like he doesn't have a lot of play strength, right? Tiny little man. Doesn't get a lot of usage over the intermediate field. That just makes sense. So you look at him, it's like we got a small, fast guy. He's going to get the gadget stuff. That's just like obvious to me. The question is, can he also get the deep stuff? Because you can't only gadget your way to being a wide receiver one, right? And I'm just a little bit less confident in that aspect of the profile, which is why I lean to other guys. The difference is last year with Quentin Johnston, I could just point and say like, hey, 2 other good wide receivers right there. I'm a lot less confident in Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas than I was in Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. I'll caution that.
I'll say this, using Brett's film grade and their film versus analytics series, he did say like Worthy's not a very good deep ball tracker, which is concerning for a supposed deep ball threat. And the too high safety with him being the size that he is could also be a problem if there's anyone near him. So those were 2 things that I noticed. And he also apparently, going by Brett's grades, and Brett's has him ranked, I think, as wide receiver 10. Like he's just so out on him. And I obviously respect Brett Whitefield's film grading for wide receivers. His hit rate is better than most. It's his issue with playing beyond contact, and how his hands tend to loosen up on him. So I think you're right. I think there is more red flags. And as for gadgety plays, I mean, I hate that I just said, I just ranted about this on Twitter. But if it's just gadget and maybe deep ball, it sounds a lot like Jameson Williams to me. So that's what I fear is his most likely range of outcomes, is a better and best ball Jameson Williams. Why can't we get this guy the ball more type guy? That's just what
I want to make an affirmative case for Ladd McConkey because we've talked a lot about Worthy. And specifically, I want to make an affirmative case for Ladd McConkey's ceiling. I think there are very, very clear flashing red light risks to Ladd McConkey's floor. Namely, once you start saying, well, if you break it down per route, you're already halfway to Sky Moore syndrome. So, I just want to acknowledge that off the top, that the entirety of the Ladd McConkey thesis is based on a massive, massive, massive caveat that may prove to be fatal, right? The one thing I'll say is there's no obvious reason why he's only running a small amount of routes, right? This isn't like a McCole Hardman situation where it's like, oh, he's getting all these gadgety touches. And so obviously his per route stuff, he's only going to be on the field for that. So I don't think there's a real life reason where people look at Ladd McConkey and they're like, he's just a situational gadget player. That's not really his profile. The reasons why his route totals are so low is a mix of was injured a lot. Georgia is just kind of funky. They always run all these multiple tight end sets. And so the wide receivers rotate. And then they just curb stomp teams every single Saturday. And so most of their starters don't play the last 20 minutes of the game every day. So there's a lot of weird confounding reasons. But the fact remains, right? You look at nothing else, just a player where you're based off a smaller subset of routes, better chance that you're only being asked to do what you do best. And so you're always going to look better in a reduced volume sample. But if we're just looking at the ceiling case, I think people see Ladd McConkey and he has kind of a goofy name and he's a white guy and he's doesn't have these astounding stats. And the immediate thought is high floor, low ceiling, lunch pail kind of guy.
It could be Wes Welker.
Yeah. And I think A, that's not really actually how he plays. And B, I just don't think people are very good at describing what a ceiling means. Why is it that a big limited player who runs for jump balls is inherently a higher ceiling bet than a guy who earns a lot of targets? Because who has a high fucking ceiling? Keenan Allen, right? How to Amon-Ra St. Brown right now is, and you can argue if it's has Amon-Ra St. Brown reached it? Well, but if he's reached the ceiling, he reached it as the wide receiver 4 overall in Dynasty. So if we're talking about Ladd McConkey's current ADP, pretty high archetype on that.
I have Deontay Johnson actually as my more than likely range of outcomes for him, a guy that gives you a single top 12 wide receiver season, maybe 2. And then it's kind of a 15 to 18 guy outside of that. That's kind of what I have for him. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. If I draft him at 1.9.
I mean, that's the median, right? Or maybe it's in a little high median, but it's, so I'm not saying he's going to be Keenan Allen or anything like that. I'm just saying what we do have with Ladd McConkey is we have a profile that on a limited sample earns a shit ton of targets and is very efficient on them. And he does it most concentrated to the intermediate areas of the field, which is really what I want to see in terms of what translates from college to the pros. It's winning on NFL routes. And, that's McConkey. Can he do it on way more routes? I don't know. Landing spot. I really just, I don't think the landing spot should be the defining factor, but and I think I convinced Ryan on this a little bit, but I think the Chargers just clearly a better landing spot than the Chiefs. At the absolute ceiling, sure, I'll take the Chiefs. But Justin Herbert as a fantasy supporting quarterback outside of the Harbaugh shenaniganery is really not that different than Patrick Mahomes as a fantasy supporting quarterback. We've seen Justin Herbert bring out Mike Williams from a complete nothing to a borderline wide receiver 1. We've seen him force feed Keenan Allen over 20 points per game. He can deliver for fantasy dudes if he's asked to drop back. And then McConkey's just going to have no route obstacles. Like he's out there with Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer and Darius Davis and a couple of day 3 picks. Like if he's any good, we're running as many routes as he can possibly earn and earning as many targets on those. Whereas Worthy's got like Rice, who's a stud. He's got Kelsey, who's a stud. He's got Brown, who's a professional wide receiver. So I just see there, it's like, okay, like I got a guy who, based on this assumption, if he can translate it to full routes, can just be a 25% target share guy and run all the routes for the Chargers. I'm like, yeah, that's good enough ceiling for me. Like that sounds pretty sick. So I'm very in on Ladd, and I think that people should be unafraid to talk about Ladd as a high ceiling option.
Yeah, I have a couple points to spin off of that. So the first is in terms what you said about how we conceive of players' ceilings. I do think our understanding of that is kind of outdated. So as you say, the giant contested catch guy that's going to run down the field. I think that's like AJ Green and Julio Jones and all those guys in the back of our consciousness, what we think of, who are like the best wide receivers that us as a generation have ever like watched play. It like we think back to those guys, I guess. But the league has changed a ton since those guys were at their peaks. Slot receivers and not just slot receivers, but like mostly slot receivers. There are clear advantages to running a lot of your routes out of the slot in a league where the too high safety rate is as high as it is right now. That is legitimately like a big point. I know like in season, we were always tracking like, okay, when is Amon-Ra St. Brown facing like a too high heavy defense? Are they going to play as much too high as they usually do? Because the like guys like him are just so much more efficient against those types of looks. And I do think Ladd could fit into that, and that could be great for fantasy. Sort of the other point, and I should say first that I have Ladd. I think like around where Jakob does. He's my wide receiver for my 11th rookie overall. So just, macro thoughts are going to be similar. But I will say when I am like auditing my thoughts and my takes on a player, so backing up, everybody coming into this offseason, like the common question was, well, who's this year's Puka Nacua? And I'm sick of hearing it. I'm sick of talking about it. Whatever, that's a thing. I think the good question to ask that is sort of the reverse of that is, how is Puka Nacua affecting how I am looking at this class right now? And do I need to be aware of that? And I think with Puka, like the defining trait of his profile, if you were going to hindsight look back at Puka and say, how did I miss him? It is the yards per route run. It is the per route stuff where he wasn't on the field.
That's what makes me nervous about being in on Ladd, is that I know I would be less in on him if this happened last year. And like, I'm pretty sure I just should have cared about this stuff more last year, but also it's also probably pressing too much on my brain. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to balance like learning a lesson that was important to learn without now accepting it as our truth and gospel moving forward.
Yeah, no, it's like, just as humans, it's very hard to be an objective observer of our mind and our process. And that's kind of the problem here is, like, am I more willing to just jump into the per route stuff because I have Puka in the back of my mind? So all that said, I still have Ladd where I have him at wide receiver 4. I still want shares of him. As Jakob laid out, I do think his situation is great. The floor is also probably pretty decent just based off of that. But yeah, if we're poking holes, both in the prospect and in my own takes and my own analysis, that's where I would look.
All right. We are going to take a break that we should have taken 10 minutes ago. But Tom, by getting sick, has failed in his ability to drive the commercial bus on time. So we're going to take a very brief break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of your questions that we got. So we'll see you in just a couple moments. All right. Here's how I'm going to drive this shit. We already have a few questions people sent in ahead of the show, but we understand that some of you guys are already in the chat. We're going to make this a rapid fire situation.
Good
So
luck.
we're going to give this, minute max to each person.
As rapid
me.
fire as
Including me.
Dynasty
I'm gonna hold
Points
myself
can
to
make it.
Including me. And first question is from the chat, and I apologize. I saw the question and then I lost it, so I forgot who sent it. So my apologies to you. But someone asked, how early is too early for Bo Nix? We should be able to answer this in less than 20 seconds because you can just say where you've ranked Bo Nix.
Yeah, so I think I'm the highest on Nix. I have him at the 109. I do have him in a 2-player tier with Brock Bowers. That was mostly just to troll Jacob and Thomas, though. So I would say the 108 is too high for Bo Nix.
I'll say the 19 is too high for Bo Nix.
I'll say the same as Brian. I have Bo Nix ranked at the 112, but I have a flat tier from 1.9 to 2.1, and I think you can make a call on positional need between who you want of the wide receivers, Brooks and Nix. So take him at the 108. I'm giving you a finger wag. Take him at the 109. Totally fine with me. I will just note he seems to pretty frequently fall in drafts. Like I've drafted him twice, like the 2-3. So if you are sitting at the 109, maybe consider trading back a couple spots and getting him anyway. Next question from the chat today is, who is your absolute favorite rookie sleeper? And clarifies that means 3rd round plus.
Well, I have a new one. Obviously I've hammered Garendo, Luke McCaffrey, and Tracy Jr. to the floor, but I'll take the other 49er back just for PTSD reasons. I'll take Cody Schrader. Sigmund Bloom has already said it wouldn't be surprising if Schrader took over Garando's backup role. Draft capital be damned. Maybe we get an Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon repeat. I don't know, but he's free. He's never drafted. Get him on your waivers afterwards, or nap him up in the last bottom ringers of round 4. Cody Schrader of the 49ers is one of my favorite draft sleepers right now.
Mr. Heath.
I'm gonna keep it simple and go with Tracy. I just watching the guy, it's just so fun to see how he just bounces off of defenders in a way that I can't really remember seeing any other college prospect do. So yeah, he's the guy I'm drafting the most in like the 3rd and the 4th round of rookie drafts. His ADP on Sleeper is 999 right now, or at least it was when I last drafted him about 4 hours ago. So yeah,
he went undrafted in my 5-round home league. So that's
wow.
how some of the undrafted ADP is helping. The home leagues are not. This is a different home league. It's a league with people from Winnipeg, but it's not Frozen Tundra, Tom. Don't worry. It's just I didn't feel the need to clarify for the purposes of our audience, but I'm in 6 to 8 leagues of people who are not on Twitter, is what I'm saying, basically. Right. And cool one of them, we've already done a 5-round draft, and I was constantly trying to trade up into the 5th to get him and Kamani Vidal, who was also nearly went unranked. And like, I'm trying to literally offer Russell Wilson for 2/5 to draft Tracy and Vidal, and people are not accepting. And I was like losing my mind. Anyway, so I've mentioned Vidal by proxy. He's my sleeper. He's your sleeper. He's all of our sleepers. So I'll give you one non-Vidal name, which is Ray Davis is another guy that I'm prioritizing in as many drafts as possible. I was really excited about him on the draft show. Older prospect, but he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. A guy that's pretty capable in the passing game, capable in pass protection, and based on how they used James Cook last year, I think probably has a chance to get a decent amount of goal line carries. I don't know how useful that is for fantasy on a week-to-week basis, but I think you ideally get him to show enough in situational football that then if James Cook ever sprains an ankle, you're just sliding him right into your lineup, no questions asked, for 2 to 4 weeks. We got another question in here. Oh boy, did I miss it already? I'm not good at this. This is why I'm a backup.
Are you looking for this one?
That's the exact one that I was looking for. And then we're going to get into the ones that are already on the show sheet. How would you change your quarterback rankings in 10-team leagues relative to other players?
That's interesting. I devalue quarterbacks a lot in a 10-team. Like, I'm just shooting for the high. Like, Nix is not a guy I would draft as desperately in a 10-team. Like, you would probably be my 14th player. Like, he would just get pushed down and everyone behind him would push up to me. But the top end players don't change that much for me. It's the mid-ringing tiers that would, because they're more readily available for you, right? If you think about 4 quarterbacks not getting started each week, and then that's 4 more backups that people have to hold on to a little bit more, so, or a little bit less. So, 8 quarterbacks is a big amount. So,
definitely, yeah, there is a big market effect there. I mean, you're not going to care about the market effect if it's week 6 and your QB2 goes down and you have nothing. So that's at least worth considering. But yeah, I would, as Tom said, I would just push the non-elite guys down. So I mean, like the first 4 guys I still will have in all of the top 8. But yeah, with Nix, I'm not taking him at 109 in a 10-team league.
Yeah, I think it just changes the replacement level, right? Every team has an opportunity to have 3 quarterbacks. Your replacement level quarterback is now 20 instead of 24. So that's where Jaden Daniels would be my QB2 in 10-team for sure, because I think he has the highest pure upside, even if I think that the extent of his upside versus May is exaggerated. The bar is higher for value over replacement, so you need to be targeting higher upside, and the downside risk of quarterback is lower because you're way less likely to get left with a chair, right? Because just fundamental math, every single person can roster 3 quarterbacks. And so if you just have Derek Carr for free, or Baker Mayfield for almost free, just sitting there, and Jaden Daniels busts, it's just not quite as detrimental to you. So I'm looking more at those guys. I'm shifting McCarthy down relative to his peers. I'm shifting Nix, Penix especially down relative to his tier. Like the whole deal with Penix is one day you're going to open up your present under the Christmas tree and have a starting quarterback, and it's that only matters as much as that present matters. Let's get to some of the ones on the sheet. So mailbag questions. First one is a trade question. It says, I just got this trade offer in 12-team Superflex. I still have 103 to take a quarterback. I have A.J. Brown, Chris Olave. It says Kirk. I'm going to assume that means Christian Kirk, but I guess it could also mean Cousins. Oh, no. It says Christian Kirk, Addison, Jaden Reed, and McLaurin at wide receiver. He said he would consider 26 third too. And the trade is, I'm trying to zoom in here. Trade is, he's being asked to send the 111 and a 25 third for the 203, a 25 second, and a 406. And this is, I think a pretty universal question of just what are you looking for to trade back in this range of the draft? I'm digging this. To me, there's 2 fundamental tiers, or actually I would say 3 fundamental tiers in this draft class. The first one's after 2. That's not actually a tier that I have. I have Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors in the same tier, but if your experience is anything close to mine in these rookie drafts, if you want to trade for Malik Neighbors by trading up or trading stuff or whatever, it will cost you, but it is doable. People are willing to trade you Malik Neighbors. People are just not willing to trade you Marvin Harrison. The amount of Marvin Harrisons that you're going to get are the amount of 101s and 102s you walk into your drafts with. You should not be counting on adding more Harrisons on Caleb Williams by trade ups. So I think it's after 2. It's after 8. And for me, it's after 18. Although, people don't care about round 1 wide receivers anymore. And sometimes they last until the 3rd round with Xavier. So you're asking me if I'm there at the 1-9, 110. Hell yeah, I'm trying to trade him. This guy's getting a 25-2 for his efforts. Absolutely. I've traded back for less, man. The only scenario where I might not is I don't have a QB2. I just need Bo Nix. I'm taking Bo Nix, right? It's not going to be worth it. But if I'm okay, I don't really care that much positionally. I'm talking to every single person up until at least the 206. seeing what they'll offer. And like, I might not even need that much. Like I've been able to, we love the third round in this draft. Like I've done a couple where I've just moved back like to the 1-9 to the 1-11 and just added like literally like the 308. I'm like, I don't really care actually at all between these players. I don't know who you're going to pick. I don't know who's going to be left for me. I don't mind. I might get my guy anyway. Sure, I'll take an extra Ray Davis shot.
Yep. Yeah, I would just largely co-sign and agree there. I've found that if my pick is outside of the once, for me, it's a tier of 7. So if I'm outside of the 107, I find that I'm just trading back a lot this year.
Yeah, this is just an easy move for me. We're tiering sideways and adding quite a bit. We've talked enough about how much we like our thirds. This is a pretty easy pick.
All right. The next question is somewhat related. We've talked about there being a value break at the 108, 109, and again around the 204, 206. And yes, we just did. I've seen a lot of trade down scenarios, which we just talked about, but can you touch on a veteran target that you would try to pivot to, have seen get acquired when you find yourself at the breaking point of those tiers?
I'll note that this comes from Axe Bakara, and also to get your questions in, when we do one of these, whether we post it on Twitter or in Discord itself, if you hashtag Dynasty Points, there is a greater chance your question does get selected. So appreciate Axe Bakara. And the question before that did come from Jimmy Changa. So shout out to you guys. I'll start with this because I've done one of these recently. I traded 206 for Aaron Rodgers pretty straight up. And I'm just going to try to find that veteran superflex quarterback like Aaron Rodgers that I can just continuously add for mid to late seconds. And I'm just going to hammer it. Also saw Axe Bakara himself acquire Christian Kirk for two late thirds. So I mean, I'll do that all day. I'll do that all day as well. Okay. So it's important to note that people will sell vets that are less sexy, and I think Christian Kirk's a really good one of those targets. So
yeah, you took Kirk right out of my mouth. I got him for the 305, I think. So
what the hell?
Yeah, I don't know.
Score like 16 points per game this year. Like
Brian Thomas Jr. is really like
Brian Thomas helps Christian Kirk. Like that's like, you want to talk about the dream scenario if you're Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram. It's two guys, and obviously I think Thomas is better than Gabe Davis, but it's two guys whose primary role is to run down the field and drag safety help with them wherever they go, right? Like Thomas is a big help to everyone in this offense, to me, if he gets, right? Like yeah, you two are helping the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. But right, like if Brian Thomas hits, it's in a way that is just, that's raising the tide on all boats, right? It's finally Trevor has someone to throw deep to. It's going to help this passing game's efficiency because they're actually able to, not just throw 6-yard out routes that the cornerbacks are sitting on all day. Like whatever, either he's going to be a bust, in which case Kirk is going to get all the volume he wants, or he's going to succeed, in which case this offense is going to be a lot more efficient and there's legitimately going to be more room over the middle of the field. I would not let Brian Thomas Jr. scare you off of Christian Kirk. I think Kirk is a big time buy.
Yeah. Yep. Key takeaway here is buy ambiguous situations, which we say a lot. Mm-hmm. Kirk and Ingram embody that situation. A lot of hype, new free agent wide receiver, new shiny draft pick, getting pushed up rookie boards, and maybe Lawrence will be good finally, and everyone will hit. But I'll take my bet on Kirk.
Yeah, very into Kirk. Yeah. I'll also, they already kind of gave Kirk, and that's a great name. I'll say this, like, I think if I'm looking to trade for vet, I'm probably trying to do it at that early stage, the 1-9, the 1-10. Like, I've seen some sexy names. I saw someone move Mark Andrews straight up for the 109.
Oh yeah. Shoot your shot, man. Shoot your shot.
You can get a sexy name if there's a guy who's really into Worthy, maybe a guy who's really into Brooks. Once you get into the mid two, like, one of the things I'm doing is just whichever one of Pearsall, Leggett, or Penix falls the farthest. Like in almost every draft, those guys aren't actually all going to be gone by 2-6. Some guy's going to take Mitchell. Maybe some guy wants to take Corum or Jalen Wright or something. One of these guys usually fall in the 2-8, 2-9. once there's only one of those guys left, I'm just making it my mission to just start firing offers of veterans out for that pick, just to see if I can kind of get the cheapest of a tier and trade into the draft.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. Devontae Adams and Will Levis, like going still right around the 110, 111. Like just it's okay to add a little bit too. I just felt like I needed to get that out before I forgot. It just clicked in my head. If you got to add like a 3, right, go and get those guys. They're going to still ball out. Like it's just absolutely ridiculous. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries. Okay, what do we got? We got one. We got
a couple left.
Three more questions. Okay, Buckeye Chris. Seems like this rookie class is loaded as compared to the last couple of years. Is it worth trying to trade a future pick for equal round in this year's draft for Dynasty? This is a really interesting question.
I hate this. It feels really deep right now because the draft just happened. It's not going to feel really deep like 2 weeks in the training camp and a week into the preseason. Like half of these guys are just going to die in the preseason in terms of like where the depth comes from. I wouldn't do this because this is a lateral move to me. Like if I'm trading a 25-1 or for a 25-1 and like shipping off like a late 1, I better get something on top, because you're trading, really trading a player to somebody else that can potentially help them better their pick, regardless of what the chances might actually be. You're taking on that risk. So for me, I'm greedy. You better be giving me something enough for me not to just move laterally. A second, another player. Sounds like you can add Kirk onto it apparently, but whatever you got to do, you know what I mean? Get something else. Just straight 1-for-1 is no to me. It's a lateral move where you're taking the most risk, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would also just say that this year's draft is loaded is exactly what we say at the end of April every single year.
I don't think that we say that after. I think this time last year, everybody was like, this draft sucks.
Yeah, I think last year was
I think both of the last 2 years, that was the take.
I get... okay, so you're right that there. So yes, there was an overwhelming kind of chorus of, oh, next year's draft is better. Like wait for the 2024 quarterbacks, or like that. I agree that that's been being said for the last few years, but we haven't really. At least I don't feel like that has made it harder to trade for future picks. Like theoretically, it should have made it harder to trade for 2024s, and that was not my experience last year, right? So I don't think that there's like, I think whether it's correct or not, we're always gonna kind of bake present value into this. So I don't know that it changes it very much.
And I thought the year that it actually really was difficult to trade into future years was 22 to 23, which ended up being wrong about 23, but there was like a lot of Devy hype behind the 23 draft class, specifically the running backs in that class. And I recall like it being a far more common sentiment in the 2022 first to be like, just trade your 22 picks for 23 picks. And that depending on how in the Twitter bubble your league mates were, that actually being pretty difficult to accomplish. I don't think it'll be difficult to accomplish this year if that's what you want to do. Look, cards on the table, a major feature of the walkthrough every year is me commenting on exactly when and what draft I'm trading out of the class into a future first, when I'm trading out into a future second. People may notice that was not a part of the column this year, and it wasn't because I didn't want to write about it. I do think this class is outlier level good. I think it's clear whether or not it will become that. I think from a we're all we know now perspective, it is substantially deeper and better at the top than each of the last 2 years. I think you'd have to go back to 2021 and 2020 to where it would be comparable. And I don't think that 2025 projects to be very strong. So I'm actually like, the one thing I wouldn't do, like I wouldn't be trading my 25 first to go pick at the 109 or something.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I actually would be willing, like if there's something I really want to do, like let's say I'm trying to trade up to get neighbors, or I'm trying to trade up into the top 2 or something, I am willing to put my 25-1 into play and try to make a fair value trade for something that I really want. And like, maybe it ends up being like this actually didn't happen because we got pretty close and didn't do it. But like I was trying to negotiate a trade up for neighbors that I ended up getting done with a different person when I was at the 1-6 and the 1-4 was on the clock, and he wanted my 25-1, and I was like, actually I would do the 1-6 and my 25-1 for the 1-4, and he had 2 seconds and I wanted both of them, and I was like, that actually, like, I'm okay to leverage my 25-1, and that way I get 2 shots at guys that I think are actually pretty strong value in the second. And that would not have been a trade that I was willing to do last year, even for like getting one of those guys. So I'll say I'm more willing to put my 25-1 in play. I think this reminds me a lot of the 2022 class when we look at 2025, which is right now outside of some leagues, I don't think there's a ton of knowledge yet about the 25 class. And so I think for 75 to 80% of players, it's just a blank slate. Like it's just a draft class, is a draft class, is a draft class. At some point in time, I think that the sentiment around the 25 class is going to become extremely negative because the quarterback class is so poor. It's really dependent on a running back class, which is just the most volatile thing to be dependent on based on how teams value the position, where we saw that in 2023, right? The whole hope of the 2023 class was, there's going to be 7 stud running backs. Well, there were 2 basically that actually got the draft capital, and then a few that turned out. Once the sentiment turns negative, that's when I'm fine buying in, because I don't think that there's all that much of a corollary between like how we feel about a draft class and how the draft class ends up. But I do think it's actually pretty easy to predict. Like this is one of the few market timing things that I actually will do and recommend people doing, is trying to trade based on what we think the sentiment is going to be towards the draft class. And that was what I did in 22, which was like I was trading out of 22 picks, and then leading into the 22 draft when everybody was like, you got to get rid of your 22 picks. Like that was when I was like, okay, I'll actually take on some 22 picks. So that'd be my one thing. I don't think I want to be like sitting on a ton of 25 picks this summer when someone writes the first article about how it's the worst draft class in the world. Like I would think I'd rather be the one trying to buy in at that point than be overweight.
I also just want to point out that we would be remiss not to mention that with like the whole lead up to this draft is this class sucks, this class sucks, this class sucks. And we've got some like hope and a pair of landing spots, and now it's like outlier deep class.
Well, except me from
like
this. I've never once.
No, I know. I'm not like Jacob, you said this on Twitter, you're an absolute fucking fraud. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying the general conversation around this class has been it's ass. And now it's one of the deepest classes I can remember. There's still like a bunch of really iffy profiles that just happen to get some pretty cushy spots. It's kind of the litmus test now of talent over situation. So it'll be pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, and you're right that people were saying that. I just think that like is wrong and always was wrong.
It's fair.
Like I think the only I've said this before on this show, but to me the only aspect of this class where it was weaker than average was in the late first, and that is where the landing spot gods have saved us.
Yes, yeah.
Like the top 8, I think, was always really good, still is really good. I think the depth of the class has always been really good and still is really good. I mean, one thing is in a lot of these other classes, we've had like a bunch of fallen soldiers where there's all these guys that we have hopes for, and they just tumble way down the draft board. And this year there was one. Like, I mean, I know everybody has their favorite little
3,
sleeper, right? Like I know everybody has their like Johnny Wilson or their whatever crush, but like the only guy that I would say legitimately got spiked is Troy Franklin. Like who else like got murdered in the draft?
I would say Estime, right? Estime kind of went to a janky.
But he was already like a round 3 pick.
Yeah.
Like, right. Like I think back on other years,
like boots to asses. Yeah. Troy Franklin's probably like one, and like my Penix in like a weird way as well.
Well,
so maybe.
Well, that's okay. That's some of the opposite, right? Like, here's the thing. Remember in 2022, that was when sentiment went really sour on the class because it was like maybe we're going to get some good quarterbacks, going round 1. And then it was like, oh, we're taking Pickett in the late first and everybody else falls to day 3 or round 3. And I was like, fuck. Whereas here, like we got bonus, right? We get round 1 capital on 2 guys that we didn't know we were going to get round 1 capital on for sure. I think this class, and then like we talked about, Thomas, McConkey, and Worthy getting a gift from the landing spot gods. I think really helps balance out the middle. One question from Pesky. I think we've pretty much answered this. How sure are you guys we should take Thomas over Nix?
We're
my
not.
answer is I don't think any of us are sure. Ryan has Nix over Thomas for sure. Tom, who do you have higher between the two?
Give me 2 seconds and I'm going to be able to tell you. I have Nix over Brian Thomas by 2 or 3.
Okay. And I
have
have
2.
Thomas, and I do have Thomas higher than Nix, but I'm not sure about it.
I have the
Both
2
in the same tier.
I have the 2 running backs ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. So
okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean my take on that tier is like there's 3 wide receivers, pick your favorite. There's 1 running back. You can put Benson in the tier if you want. And then there's Nix, and I'm perfectly fine if you just split that tier based on your positional need. I'm not very sure that you should take.
Can I just side note? I just want to take like a quick aside here for like why I would have Benson over Brian Thomas as well, because that's like not a common thing.
Please.
Yeah, it sucks that James Conner is there, but the Arizona running back industrial complex just hypes up whoever it is that's playing. Whether it's like DeMarcado, Michael Carter was getting saved because he went to Arizona. Benjamin was Benjamin was the first person I made a Twitter thread about, right? Just because he was there when Chase Edmonds, Dynasty darling, the minute he was a Cardinal, through multiple regimes and different quarterbacks that have had to play. If you're a Cardinals running back, your value gets boosted. And you fucking smash when you play. So betting on Connor to go down, even though he has been the cockroach of fantasy running backs where he just survives no matter what. This is a guy that should Connor miss any time this year at all, can be 15 plus points per game because Kyler dumps it off, which is weird because he's a running quarterback. He checks it down. And this offense is going to score points. He could very well be a 15-point. And who's behind Benson? DeMarcado. It's just like, okay. So
DJ Dallas is on the roster. There's
it's like pure upside plays. It's like, give me Benson over Thomas.
That is the most DJ Dallas way to describe DJ. DJ Dallas is on the roster.
Yeah.
he sure is.
So it's like
that's what he's providing.
I would be surprised if Brian Thomas hit 12 points per game. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Benson hit 14. So I think not just the floor, but the upside play is higher in Benson. So more people should be taking Benson over Brian Thomas Jr.
And my pushback for why I don't have Benson in that tier, and we've shared both sides of this, I think, on the last show, was, and I like Benson. He was my pre-draft RB1. I just think that the market has like a very glass ceiling on running backs, where to me your value return on investment with Thomas can be immediate. Like if Brian Thomas steps out week 3, 8 targets, 6 catches, 120 touchdown, get ready to learn round 3 startup pick, buddy. Like immediately. Yeah, whereas Benson, it's like, he's behind. What happens when Connor comes back? They might add someone in the draft. They might what is he gonna hold up? Like it's just a whole look at the Rashad White, the Pacheco. It's this slow, gradual where it's like, okay, fine, you're worth a late first,
but you want to talk immediate.
Maybe you're worth a mid first. Oh well, now you're old.
Immediate sell possibilities, though, I feel like are higher with running backs, right? Tajay Spears went from absolute.
This is why I disagree so hard. I think that's totally wrong.
Tajay Spears went from nobody to top 12 running back. James Robinson went from nobody to
top 12 running back. Top 12 running back is like a 6th round pick.
Yeah, I think it's easier to sell
season. I feel like people pay higher for running backs than they do wide receivers, just in a personal experience for me, because wide receivers are so readily replaceable that when a running back, quote unquote, breaks out, their value just absolutely skyrockets For me,
think
me
that's
personally,
like
this is a
years
me
ago. Like,
personally thing, but this,
speaking me personally, I mean, it's all me personally. Speaking me personally, as a guy with a lot of Kyron Williams last year, I still have a lot of Kyron Williams this year. Like not by choice. Like I just,
yeah,
I feel like all the year last year was me trying to be like, anybody want my Kyron Williams? Everybody's like, no. You want a 26-second? I'm like, not really. He's scoring 18 points per game. Anyone want to give
that's
me a
fair.
first? Like,
Yeah, well,
no.
stop playing with like Twitter wide receiver
Right.
boys
There's
and
Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers
Discord.
after week one, he gets like 11 targets, and I have offers in every league. People are like, I'll give
Yeah.
you my vital organs for Zay Flowers, and like I have like
That's
Rashad
what I
White
mean.
scoring 18 points per game, and they're like, I would rather shoot my dick off than give you an early second for Rashad White.
I would say this. I think it
does
is.
depend on who you play with. That is
Yeah.
it's a very,
Yeah,
very
a bunch of wide receiver boys, you know.
I think I can square both of these takes a little bit though. I think it is easier to sell like spot start replacement level running backs during the season if the asking price is like a second or a third round pick. But once you're getting up into that tier where you're expecting, okay, this is like a Rashad White who, yes, is scoring great right now. Maybe there's a potential for him to continue to have value beyond this year. Once you're paying for that, people are very hesitant. That's my experience.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I think
that's where I would
flip
production.
People will pay for the production they feel assured of. And so people will pay like the small price for the short-term running back, and they'll pay the iron price for what they see as the thoroughbred running back, like the Brees or the Bijan or whatever. But I agree. I mean, it depends on the league. Like, I think there are several leagues in which this is not the case, and people do get excited about young running backs still. But I have found in my leagues, at least, or in most of them, similar to Ryan, where people will be like, I'm not going to pay for the 23-year-old Rashad White when I don't really know what's happening after this year, when I can just pay a fraction of that for Aaron Jones. And I'm like, fair, same. Also, please pay me more for Rashad White. And they'll be like, I'll pay. And I'm like, well, I don't, so you're almost like free rolling it at that point. I don't know. I don't know that it's efficient either.
I feel like it is a know your league kind of take, right? It's a very hard thing. My voice is so going. I'm so sorry, everybody. And I know I don't have like the Tom rant throwing stuff energy in me right now. I'm battling through this, but that is a very know your league type thing and take. But I'm just more confident in that young upstart RB thing than Thomas.
Last question. How
from
much
a friend of the show?
Yes, friend of the show, Wyatt B. How much weight do you put into Troy Franklin being drafted to play with his college quarterback? Does it help soften the blow that he was a day 3 pick?
Nah, he's dead. He's dead, bro. Well, was that meme that you said? Like, Wyatt, I love you so much. Check out JWB. They're phenomenal over there. What was the meme you said? It was like KJ Hamler, and then it's Marvin Mims, and then it's Troy Franklin. Like, they're just the Spider-Man meme.
I like Troy Franklin better when his name was Marvin Mims, and I liked him even better when his name was. I liked KJ Hamler better when his name was Marvin Mims. I like Marvin Mims better. Yeah, so I don't know how much stock I put in this. Remember the Hollywood Brown was playing with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really well. I mean, look, it helps. It doesn't hurt. It certainly doesn't hurt. I think the best thing you can say about Troy Franklin's landing spot is not as much the quarterback. It's that they have horrible wide receivers. And so, it's kind of the case that I made for Amon-Ra St. Brown back in the day, which was like, there's two reasons. There's two things working against a day 3 pick, right? The first is that they're probably worse than we thought they were. And the second is that they'll have less opportunity than they would have. And with Amon-Ra and with Franklin, that second part is probably not the case, right? Like a lot of teams, when they're drafting day 3 players, teams don't really care if they plan on starting you or even giving you an opportunity to start when they get to day 3, which is one of the big risks, is that you're less assured of a landing spot that makes sense for you and it gives you opportunity. And that's really beneficial for Franklin, that he ends up landing in a spot where he probably will have that opportunity to win a starting job. So how much does that matter? It's like, I would say the same thing about Franklin as Javon Baker. And Franklin's going in like the early to mid second in a lot of these drafts. Baker often is going in like the late third, early fourth. Franklin's production profile is better. It's not like it's, galaxies better. How much does the production profile matter when the NFL just took a shit all over it? Like, I would way rather be taking low opportunity cost Javon Baker bets than like relatively medium to high opportunity cost Franklin bets. I won't go as far as say he's dead. I just don't think he's properly priced. Like, I would really like to be, I would be totally happy to take Franklin shots in like the early third round, but you're paying like how many, I don't know how many drafts I've seen in which Franklin has gone off the board after each of Polk and Leggett are both gone. Not a lot for me. And that's where like I am not taking a day 3 wide receiver over day 1 and early day 2 wide receivers that are just walking into starting jobs like at day 1, no questions asked. That's the line for me.
Yeah, I mostly agree there. I thought I would get some Troy Franklin. I have him ranked as my 24th rookie. But yeah, based on how my drafts have gone, I won't be getting any.
Realism hasn't set in a take lock yet.
Yeah. But yeah, I have Leggett over him. I have Polk over him. I have Jermaine Burton over him, who is a day 2 receiver who could well be walking into a starting job. I had a tweet a couple days ago showing basically that the Bengals played close to the highest rate of 3 wide receiver sets in the league last year. So, obviously part of that is going to be down to talent. They won't do that as much if they don't want Burton on the field for whatever reason, but there's at least the possibility there that he just walks into a day 1 starting job. So
yeah. No, 100%. I just want to comment on this comment real quick from Dan Calzone. Remember when Najee Harris was the top tier dynasty asset, RB sync quickly? Yeah, but you still need to invest in them, right? Like, you can win titles without them, but investing in top end running backs when they're young, and as I mentioned very early in the program, knowing when to get out is, again, knowing when to get out on a dynasty asset before the hill hits is the best and greatest tool a dynasty manager has in his belt. That's what sets players apart. So you can still and should still invest in young, very good to elite running backs. It's just knowing when to get the hell out that sinks people.
Yeah, especially when the price is like a late first in this this tier for as I said earlier in the show. Yeah, for a Jonathan Brooks who does have a 3-down skill set, is walking into a situation where he like injury recovery aside could just be an immediate 60% plus snap share type of player. So yeah, totally. I'm happy to invest.
Also, Trey, I really liked Trey's comment here. Franklin has to go above and beyond to prove he can play. Leggett, Coleman, Ladd, etc. have to prove they can't play, and that is very true. That is exactly what
It's a great point.
At the very least, if you want to be a Franklin truther, you can at least tell yourself that like he will get an opportunity, in the sense that some guys, they just get drafted on day 3, they really never get a chance, and they could be the best player, and we just might never know. We're gonna know with Troy Franklin. That depth chart is weak enough that we will get the chance to find out if he can play, but the bar is really, really high. He has to go in and earn every single snap and route that he gets in a way that these other guys, they can fuck up over and over, and they're going to get more chances. They're going to run out of chances. Draft capital doesn't make you good, but it certainly buys you second chances. And it buys you as a dynasty manager second chances to tell them. That's going to be it for our show. We've been going for 100 minutes. Tom is on his last legs here.
I'll say this. Derek Brown just showed up in the chat.
Yes, shout out to D-Row.
Little late. We're just ending up here, D bro, but we
Just
gotta
really?
talk. You and I gotta talk. We gotta get you on here.
100%.
I love all you guys from.
I couldn't tell if that was Rashad White with draft capital positive or with draft capital negative. I didn't know if that was like pro
I
or
hope it's
anti-bro.
positive. Rashad
Yeah.
White's
I'm
been good for
assuming
fantasy.
I'm assuming it's Rashad White with draft capital complimentary based on his next message.
Yeah, people are doing dumb shit in rookie drafts with Brooks falling into the second. Yeah, that's the type of stuff we'd love to have you on to talk about, D bro. We love you, homie. I will say this: if you want your questions asked, if you want us to do more of these, like I know this was really long. Yeah, good shit. Thomas can buy some cold medicine. Yeah, I'll be able to buy cold medicine, ignoring the fact that our healthcare system is free. If you like and subscribe to the channel, because the more you like and subscribe to the channel, you know, the more it helps us move up the algorithms and all that. I am dying a little bit at the moment. I don't have much voice left, but if you want more videos like this, all you got to do is when we post or just ask us, any of us in any of the Discords or on Twitter with the hashtag Dynasty Points. We will be doing a lot more of these into the off season. Not something we've done in the past, but we are trying to coordinate our content better for what you guys want exactly. So please, all the comments you want, let us drop it in there. Jacob, you obviously have thinking about thinking going all the time. Ryan, you and I are planning some content videos for the channel itself. A lot of great stuff here, guys. I appreciate it. I need to go and die. If you haven't already subscribed to Think About Thinking, the link will be in the description. It's my favorite Substack that exists right now. Yeah, hour and 41. Much love, everyone, for sticking around. You guys have been dope. We got to get out of here. Remember to check in on your loved ones, even if you're not sure that they need it. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, and that your best days are always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.